Hello and welcome back to Dream Room. If you want more birds in your garden, do not start by buying another feeder. Start by giving birds something even more important, a safe place to land, hide, drink, and rest. That one change can make a bigger difference than filling your yard with expensive decorations. And the good news is, you do not need a large backyard. You do not need a professional landscape plan. You do not even need to be strong enough to spend an entire weekend digging holes and moving heavy stones. If you have a narrow side yard, a 6 by 8 foot patio, a rented deck, a balcony, or simply a few containers outside your bedroom or home office window, you already have enough space to begin. I have worked with gardens that looked beautiful from the house, but felt almost empty outside. Perfectly cut lawns, clean fences, neat flower beds, and hardly a bird in sight. The problem was not a lack of beauty. The problem was that there was nowhere for a small bird to feel safe. Think about what a robin, wren, finch, or chickadee sees when it flies into your garden. It is looking for three things almost immediately: shelter, food, and fresh water. If those three things are close together, birds are far more likely to stop. If they are exposed in the middle of an open lawn, many birds simply keep flying. So in this video, I am going to show you 8 practical ways to turn an ordinary outdoor space into a small bird paradise. We will use things many of you already enjoy working with: flower pots, shrubs, old saucers, branches, stones, climbing plants, natural seed heads, and simple wooden garden features. You will also see why leaving one corner slightly less tidy can actually make your garden more useful to wildlife and easier for you to maintain. That matters if you are over 60, if bending and lifting is not as comfortable as it used to be, if you have limited storage, or if you simply want a garden that gives you more pleasure without creating more work. And everything should still look beautiful. We are not turning your garden into an abandoned patch of weeds. We are going to make it feel layered, peaceful, intentional, and alive. Imagine sitting with your morning coffee beside the kitchen window and noticing that the same little bird returns to the same branch every day. That is when a garden starts becoming more than decoration. And the first step is surprisingly simple. Before we feed the birds, we need to make them feel safe enough to stay. If you enjoy simple, affordable ideas for decorating small homes, patios, balconies, and gardens with natural materials, subscribe to Dream Room. Now, let's begin with the most important foundation of any bird-friendly garden: safe shelter. Z1. Create safe shelter before adding food. Before you hang a feeder, look at your garden from the point of view of a bird. A feeder full of sunflower seeds may look inviting to us, but to a small bird, food in the middle of an exposed lawn can feel like dinner served on a stage with no exit. Birds want an escape route. That means nearby shrubs, small trees, climbing plants, or dense foliage where they can disappear within a few seconds if a cat, hawk, or sudden disturbance appears. You do not need to plant a hedge around the entire property. For a small backyard, even one dense shrub placed 6 to 10 feet from a feeding area can make the space feel much safer. Holly, hawthorn, firethorn, berberis, and regionally appropriate native shrubs are especially useful because their branches create protective cover. Some also produce berries, so one plant can provide shelter and food. That is exactly the kind of double-duty feature I like in a small garden. If you have a narrow patio or rented deck, try grouping 3 containers together instead of placing pots randomly around the edges. Use one taller pot with a compact shrub, one medium-height flowering plant, and one lower pot with grasses or trailing foliage. Suddenly, you have created a miniature layered habitat without giving up much floor space. A freestanding trellis can do the same thing vertically. Place it behind a favorite chair, beside a home office window, or along an unattractive fence. Add a climber, and it becomes a privacy screen for you, and a resting place for birds. That is good garden design. One feature solving 2 or 3 problems at once. And do not worry if your garden is not perfectly tidy. Birds often prefer a space with layers, texture, and a few protected corners over a garden where every shrub has been clipped into a perfect ball. For viewers over 60, this is also good news. You do not have to dig up half the yard or haul heavy landscaping materials. Start with one movable container, one shrub, or one climbing plant. Then watch what happens. Notice where birds pause before approaching the feeder. Notice which branch they choose when they feel nervous. Those observations will tell you where the next piece of shelter should go. Once birds discover that your garden gives them somewhere safe to retreat, they are much more likely to return. And now that we have created that first protective layer, we can give them something even more valuable, a secure place to sleep in winter, and possibly raise a family in spring. 2. Install a nest box in the right place. Once your garden has some natural shelter, the next step is to add a safe place where birds can rest, and later, possibly nest. A simple wooden nest box can do both. During colder months, small birds may use a box as a sheltered roosting place at night. Then, when spring arrives, the same box may become a nesting site. But placement matters more than price. You do not need an expensive decorative birdhouse with fancy paint, metal ornaments, or a complicated roof. A solid wooden box that stays dry, secure, and protected from extreme weather is usually far more useful. Start with height. Mount the box above easy cat reach and avoid placing it beside fences, shelves, or low branches that predators can use as stepping stones. Then think about wind and heat. If strong winds usually come from one direction in your garden, do not point the entrance directly toward them. And if the wall receives intense afternoon sun for several hours, choose a cooler location. A box that becomes too hot in summer can be uncomfortable and unsafe. Different birds also prefer different entrance hole sizes, so choose a box designed for species commonly found in your area. Wrens, chickadees, tits, and other small cavity nesting birds may all have slightly different requirements. One detail is easy to overlook. Avoid decorative perches directly beneath the entrance hole. Small birds do not need them to enter, and a perch may make access easier for predators. Now think about where you will enjoy the box from inside your home. A quiet wall visible from a kitchen window, bedroom, or home office desk can be ideal. You get to observe the activity without constantly walking close to the nest. For renters, a freestanding post or another permitted garden structure may provide an alternative to drilling into the house. And if you are over 60, have limited hand strength, or simply do not feel comfortable on ladders, ask someone to help with the installation. There is no reason to risk a fall for a bird box. Once it is securely in place, leave it alone as much as possible. Birds need time to investigate new objects and decide whether they feel safe. And while a nest box gives them protection, the next improvement gives them a reason to stay even longer. We are going to turn your plants into a natural pantry that can provide food through several seasons. 3. Turn your plants into a natural bird pantry. Feeders are useful, but some of the best bird food can come directly from the plants already growing in your garden. That is especially valuable in a small space, because one good shrub can do several jobs at once. It can give you seasonal color, soften a fence, provide privacy, shelter insects, and produce berries or seeds that birds can eat. Beautyberry is a good example. Its clusters of bright purple berries become especially noticeable in autumn, when many other plants are beginning to fade. Cotoneaster can also produce masses of small berries that are easy for smaller birds to eat. Hawthorn, firethorn, and roses that form hips add another layer of natural food. Crab apples are useful too, particularly in modest-sized gardens where a full-size fruit tree may be too large. As the small fruits soften later in the season, where birds can begin feeding on them. The goal is not to plant one spectacular berry shrub and expect it to provide everything. Think in seasons. A bird-friendly garden works better when different plants provide something useful at different times of the year. Spring and summer flowers can attract insects. Autumn brings berries and fruit. Then winter can offer seeds and fruits that remain on the plants after the flowers have disappeared. This is why you should not rush to cut every flower stem down as soon as it turns brown. Coneflowers, sunflowers, and ornamental grasses can continue producing useful seeds long after their colorful display has finished. They also give the garden texture during colder months. And there is another simple rule if you grow fruit. You do not have to choose between feeding your family and feeding the birds. Harvest what you need, then leave part of the crop behind. A few crab apples, berries, or rose hips left on the plant can become a valuable food source when natural supplies begin to decline. Even if your garden is small, this idea still works. One compact berry-producing shrub, one container with a seed-producing perennial, or one small ornamental tree can make a noticeable difference. The important thing is to stop thinking of plants only as decoration. Choose plants that look beautiful to you while also offering something useful to wildlife. And once you begin looking at your garden this way, you may notice something surprising. Some of the materials we usually remove in the name of keeping a garden tidy are exactly the things birds need most. That is where we are going next. 4. Stop making every corner of the garden too tidy. One of the easiest ways to make your garden more welcoming to birds is also one of the easiest ways to reduce your workload. Stop cleaning up every single corner. Many gardeners spend autumn cutting down stems, collecting every leaf, removing seed heads, and hauling away small branches. But those materials are not always waste. Fallen leaves beneath shrubs can shelter beetles, caterpillars, spiders, and other tiny creatures. Those insects then become natural food for birds. Old flower stems can be useful too. Instead of cutting every perennial to the ground as soon as the flowers fade, leave selected stems and seed heads standing through winter. Coneflowers, sunflowers, and ornamental grasses are good examples. The dried shapes can look beautiful when covered with frost, and birds may visit them for seeds. You can also leave a small amount of safe dead wood or a few twigs in a quiet corner. The key is not to let the entire garden become messy. Create one intentional wild area. If you have a small backyard, place it behind a shrub, beside the shed, or toward the back of a flower border where it does not dominate the view. A handful of leaves, several small branches, and a few standing stems can be enough. Then make that area look deliberate. Use a line of stones, a short piece of timber, or a simple low border around it. Suddenly, what might have looked untidy becomes part of the garden design. This approach is particularly useful if you are over 60 or simply tired of spending every autumn filling bag after bag with garden waste. Less cleanup means less bending, less lifting, and fewer trips carrying heavy bags across the yard. At the same time, you are leaving behind some of the materials birds depend on for food and shelter. That is a very good trade. A beautiful garden does not have to look perfectly polished from fence to fence. In fact, a little texture and natural variation often makes a small space feel softer, warmer, and more interesting. So before you cut something down or throw it away, ask one simple question. Could this stay here until spring? Sometimes the best thing you can do for wildlife is simply do less. And once your garden is providing shelter and natural food, you can add the next layer carefully. 1 or 2 well-placed feeding stations. 5. Add 1 or 2 smart feeding stations. Once your garden already provides shelter and some natural food, feeders become a useful extra layer. They are especially valuable during colder months, when berries, seeds, and insects become harder for birds to find. But more feeders do not automatically mean a better bird garden. For most small spaces, 1 or 2 well-placed feeding stations are enough. That keeps the setup simple, easier to clean, and much easier to maintain if you do not want another garden chore every morning. Choose food based on the birds common in your area. A good quality seed mix can attract several species. Sunflower seeds are another popular option, while suitable suet or fat-based foods can provide extra energy during colder weather. Now pay attention to placement. A feeder should not sit completely exposed in the middle of an open space. Birds feel more confident when there is a shrub, small tree, or other cover nearby where they can retreat quickly. At the same time, do not place the feeder directly inside dense foliage. Cats and other predators may use thick cover as a hiding place. The ideal location gives birds a clear view of the surrounding area while keeping safe shelter within easy reach. If squirrels regularly empty the feeder before the birds arrive, consider a protective cage or a squirrel-resistant design. This can be especially helpful if you are trying to avoid constantly refilling expensive seed. There is one more detail that matters just as much as the food itself. Keep the feeder clean. Old seed, droppings, and damp food can build up quickly. A neglected feeder may create problems rather than helping the birds. That is why I prefer 1 or 2 simple feeders that can be opened, emptied, and cleaned without complicated parts. And place them somewhere you can enjoy them too. A feeder outside the kitchen window can make breakfast more interesting. One beside the living room or bedroom window can bring movement into the view. If you work from home, position it where you can occasionally look away from the screen and watch the garden for a minute. For viewers over 60, also keep the feeder at a height that is comfortable to refill without awkward stretching or repeated bending. A feeding station should make your garden more enjoyable, not create extra strain. Once birds begin visiting regularly for food, there is one more basic need that can make them stay even longer: fresh water. And you can provide it with something as simple as an old flower pot and a shallow saucer. 6. Make a beautiful bird bath from an old flower pot. Food is important, but birds need something even more basic every single day: fresh water. A simple water source can sometimes attract birds to a garden surprisingly quickly, especially during hot, dry weather or in places where natural water is difficult to find. And you do not need to buy a heavy stone bird bath. You can make a practical one from an old flower pot and a broad, shallow saucer. Turn the flower pot upside down so it becomes the base. Then place the saucer on top. If you want the 2 pieces to stay together permanently, use an outdoor safe adhesive around the rim and allow it to cure properly before adding water. The most important thing is depth. Birds generally feel safer in shallow water than in a deep container. Add a few clean pebbles or small stones inside the saucer. These give smaller birds a stable place to stand while they drink or bathe. Now think carefully about where you place it. Birds need to see what is happening around them, so avoid hiding the bath deep inside a thick shrub where a cat could approach unnoticed. Instead, choose an open spot with protective cover nearby. That gives birds visibility while still allowing them to reach a shrub or small tree quickly if they feel threatened. Keep the water fresh. Birds will not only drink from the bath, they will splash, bathe, and sometimes leave dirt or feathers behind. When the water starts looking cloudy, tip it out, rinse the saucer, return the stones, and refill it. This is another reason a lightweight flower pot setup works so well. It is easier to move and clean than a large concrete basin. If bending is uncomfortable, especially for viewers over 60, raise the bath to a comfortable height and place it reasonably close to a hose or where you normally keep your watering can. That way, refreshing the water becomes part of your normal garden routine rather than another difficult job. And make it beautiful. Surround the bird bath with low flowers, herbs, ornamental grasses, or a few coordinated containers so it feels like an intentional focal point. On a balcony, you can make an even smaller version using a stable, shallow dish on a sturdy plant stand. You do not need much space. A little clean water, positioned correctly, can become one of the busiest places in your garden. And if your entire outdoor area is only a small patio or balcony, the next idea will show you how to combine shelter, plants, food, and water into one compact bird-friendly space. 7. Build a bird paradise, even on a tiny patio or balcony. If you are thinking, this is lovely, but my outdoor space is too small, do not give up on the idea. Birds care less about square footage than we often imagine. What matters is whether your space offers useful structure, shelter, food, and water. Even a 6 by 8 foot patio, a narrow rented deck, or a small balcony can provide those things if you build upward instead of spreading everything across the floor. Start with one tall container holding a compact shrub. Beside it, add a lighter pot with a climbing plant and a freestanding trellis. This creates height without needing to drill into a wall, which is especially useful if you rent your home. Then add 1 or 2 flowering containers at medium height. Finish the group with an ornamental grass or another seed-producing plant, a small feeder, and a shallow dish of fresh water. The important word here is group. Do not scatter 6 individual pots around the edges of the patio. Bring several containers together. When plants overlap at different heights, they begin to imitate the layered shelter birds would naturally find in a hedge or thicket. At the same time, the arrangement feels fuller and more intentional from inside your home. Place it beside a patio chair and it can become a green privacy screen. Position it outside a bedroom or home office window and you create something beautiful to look at every day. It can even soften an unattractive fence, blank wall, or corner of a rented deck without making permanent changes. If moving heavy containers is difficult, choose lightweight pots or place larger containers on wheeled plant caddies. That makes seasonal rearranging much easier, particularly if your hand strength or mobility is limited. Natural materials also help the space feel calm rather than cluttered. Terracotta pots, wood, stone, woven basket covers, simple branches, and natural-looking plant supports can work together beautifully without requiring expensive decor. And remember, you do not need dozens of plants. A tall shrub, a climber, several flowers, one grass, water, and a feeder can already create multiple layers in a very small footprint. That is the advantage of thoughtful small space design. 6 or 8 square feet may seem insignificant to us, but to a visiting bird, it can become a useful stopping place between much larger habitats. Once you have created that compact sanctuary, there is one final step. We need to make sure the birds you attract can use it safely enough to keep coming back. 8. Remove the hidden dangers and create a garden birds want to return to. Attracting birds is only half the job. The other half is making sure your garden is safe enough for them to keep coming back. Start with chemicals. Broad insecticides may remove pests, but they also remove many of the insects birds depend on for food, especially during nesting season when adults are feeding their young. If you can reduce unnecessary spraying, your garden becomes more useful almost immediately. Now think about predators. Cats are one of the biggest concerns around feeding and nesting areas, so avoid placing feeders or bird baths where a cat can hide just a few feet away. Dense shrubs are useful as shelter, but there should still be enough open space around feeding and drinking areas for birds to see danger approaching. Windows are another hidden risk. Large glass doors and bright windows can reflect trees and open sky, making birds think they can fly straight through. If you notice repeated collisions near a feeder or planted area, use appropriate exterior window markers or bird-visible treatments to help break up the reflection. Water also needs attention. Keep bird baths away from garden chemicals, fertilizers, and contaminated runoff. Fresh, clean water should remain exactly that. And try not to place feeding stations beside frequently used doors, lawn equipment, or noisy areas where birds are constantly startled. Instead, create a quieter observation zone. A simple chair, small bench, or garden seat positioned several feet away can give you a comfortable place to watch without disturbing them. For viewers over 60, keep the route to that area level, clear, and non-slip. Place feeders and water where you can reach them without repeated bending, awkward stretching, or carrying heavy containers across the garden. The easier the setup is to maintain, the more likely you are to keep it working throughout the year. Then comes the part many gardeners forget. Sit down. Watch. You may begin noticing that one bird arrives first every morning, another always uses the same branch, and another prefers bathing just before sunset. Over time, these small routines become familiar. That is when your garden stops feeling like a collection of plants and starts feeling like a living place. You have now created shelter, food, water, nesting opportunities, and safer surroundings. And in the conclusion, we will bring all 8 ideas together into one simple plan you can start with this week. Conclusion: shelter, food, water, and a little wildness. You do not need a huge garden to create a paradise for birds. You need a few thoughtful things in the right places: safe shelter, a secure nest box, natural food, 1 or 2 clean feeders, fresh water, and a little space where nature is allowed to stay slightly untidy. That is enough to begin. If your garden is small, work vertically. Group containers together, add a compact shrub or climber, and create layers instead of filling every inch of floor space. If you are over 60, keep it comfortable. Choose lightweight pots, place feeders where they are easy to refill, and keep your bird bath close to the hose or watering can. You do not have to complete all 8 ideas this weekend. Start with 1. Leave a few seed heads standing. Put out a shallow dish of clean water. Move your feeder closer to safe cover. Plant 1 berry-producing shrub, or install a simple wooden nest box in a sheltered position. Then watch. Over the next few weeks, you may notice a robin visiting the same corner every morning. A finch may discover your seed heads. A wren may begin exploring the shrubs. And slowly, your outdoor space begins to change. It becomes more than a neat patio, balcony, or backyard. It becomes a living place. A place with movement, birdsong, changing seasons, and small moments worth stopping for. And perhaps that is the best part of creating a bird-friendly garden. You begin by making the space better for wildlife, but in the process, you often make it more peaceful and enjoyable for yourself too. Now, I would love to hear from you. Which bird would you most like to attract to your garden, patio, or balcony? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoy simple, affordable ideas for decorating small homes, patios, balconies, and gardens with natural materials, subscribe to Dream Room. And follow the channel for more practical inspiration. Until next time, keep creating a home that feels beautiful, peaceful, and alive.